Live. All right. Thank you and welcome to the February 10th Finance and Capital Management Committee of the Akron Board of Education. And we have added this second meeting of the month to extend our conversation around our transition from committee members and our committee structure being tweaked a little bit from 2020 heading into 2021. And really today's goal on the Finance Committee is item 3.02 is our strategic plan, so to speak. And I know strategic planning is a very in-depth process, but we want to have a little mini strategic plan as it relates to Finance Committee. And I know that we're doing that with our other committees. So we can hit our goals and objectives for the year and bring that back to the committee of the whole. And we're welcoming new board members. Thanks for joining. All right, the first item on the agenda is 2.01. I'm going to share my screen. Excited to...
Hey guys, this is Derek. Sorry, my 11 o'clock ran over.
No worries. Thanks for joining.
Yes, and I'm having
Hey,
connecting from computers. I apologize for being probably a little too vertical mobile, but
I'm actually having the same. Well, hey, I'm actually having the same problem, Patrick. I can't get my Google Meet to connect with my computer. I've been clicking on it, so that's which is why I'm on the phone. Once my computer decides to cooperate, I'll hop on via Google Meet.
All right. Well, stop me along the way because I'll be sharing my screen throughout, and I'll try to keep this within the 12 o'clock lunch hour so that you can make your meetings at 1, but willing to stay on however long we need to for those folks who will have some more questions. The first item is 2.01, our advocacy page, and I believe we are live. This just got posted to our website, so this is really exciting. This is a culmination of our work over the past year and having an advocacy page. Are you seeing the advocacy site?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And so we'll have an opening paragraph there really about fair and equitable funding as necessary to ensure every child receives the necessary resources to develop 21st century learning skills. And as you'll see through the strategic plan, whether it be finance or any other committee, we'll obviously put student learning first. We've got a lot of resources on here, and this is iterative. So as you give us feedback, as new legislation comes along, like the Fair School Funding Plan or House Bill 1, this will be developing and hopefully and frequently changing, maybe even monthly or more frequently as this budget season develops. So main page here, I'll have some links so that we don't overwhelm this. We have links to the Fair School Funding Plan. This has lots and lots of resources, all the initial reports, all the House Bill 305, Senate Bill 376 learning materials. Somebody really wants to take a deep dive. These are the connections that they have. Right now, and I know Ms. Autry has been really a driving force behind getting resources into our public's hands so we can turn them into advocates and not just us. So we're going to be working on that information, having sample letters. But right now, just so you know, this Fair School Funding Plan has those resources available. Ruth Solomon's watching. She and I just talked about the letters that were released in November that we helped the education associations get out in terms of how to connect with your legislators, letters, board resolutions, those kind of things. We will post those today, tomorrow, here shortly to this website. And then this is the developing part of a little background from the last Finance Committee meeting, a little background on why schools ask for school levies, the history of this shared responsibility between the state and the local on how to fund our schools. So there'll be a little information session here that gives the public a perspective of why this is a partnership, why it's an important partnership. And hopefully once they study those things and I think one of the things that this board recognizes with our community is we just won't communicate in times of need, right? So we will communicate, not just when we need a levy, because that's where the interaction between the public and the schools maybe could seem disingenuous. And I know none of us believe that in that method. Then legislative overviews and resources. This is where we saw from our previous Finance Committee meetings. And if you're seeing those, you know, these are interactive summaries of all the pending legislation. And a lot of these we covered. And again, if somebody really wants to familiarize herself. And so I think maybe I'll pose what's missing on this page is maybe a click here link on how do I become involved, right? And so I'll pause and let you respond to that, making sure that we're hitting your direction on this goal.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your work, continued work on this. I think it's great. I do look forward to that click here button. I think the easier we can make it for folks to click here and, you know, it'll take them directly to whatever it is without a whole lot of them, oh, I got to fill this out, create a password, those types of things. If we can eliminate, I think this, you know, would be very helpful. But I appreciate the work on it. I was thinking too, I know on social media, sometimes we have those little mini videos that acknowledge staff. I think as we move forward, launching this advocacy page, it might be a good idea just to have something that just announces that we have it, to try to drive people to look at it. That might be helpful in getting it out.
I really like that. And I remember Miss Autry and Dr. Hall, we talked about even you folks coming on and shooting videos for us, little advocacy call outs and those kind of things. And I think we were going to hit that mark before COVID. But during state budget time, we know how to use technology quite well now. I don't think there's any reason why we can't do that.
Hey, Ryan, quick question for you.
Yes.
No, quick, Patrick.
I would echo what Diana says. This is excellent, Ryan. Thank you so much and for your work on it. I look forward to the click now buttons too. And I think borrowing from sort of the legislative advocacy and sort of development worlds, I think specific asks are always great too. Like, people are more likely to click if you're asking for something specific, I think. So somehow making, you know, where we need the most help, or maybe it's a click here to support House Bill 1, or click here to support X, Y, or Z. So a specific ask would be nice too. But I echo Diana, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
What about if something like, I know I get texts and emails all the time. Click here and you can write a letter to your state senator or your state rep and tell them you want them to support whatever it is, and it will autofill your information and send an email to whichever person it happens to be. And that could get very specific too.
I like that. Maybe even a link to the senator or representative's contact here page with a script that they can copy and paste into that, because a lot of them have those pre-form. It says, how would you like to communicate with the state legislator? I think we can definitely do that.
Exactly. And it takes a lot of the work away, right? You don't even really have to write your own letter. They have letters already for you, and you just click to send it after you fill out the forms.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Val, as well. I had a similar comment to Patrick's about I think I was going to say kind of that with that leading question, right? So, want to learn more about how you can blah, 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 right? Or, want to know how to do this? Click here, right? I mean, so, and then my other question for you was going to be around those legislative summaries. That's not easy work to do those summaries. I was going to ask, as a person who took a legislative clinic when I was in law school and had to do some of that, summarizing some of those bills can be very painstaking. So I was going to ask, so are you the one who's doing those summaries too, or is somebody helping you with that?
Ruth, okay, so the originator of that content is coming from a bunch of different agencies. So I would say OASBO, BASA, Gongware, and Ruth is really the one. I'm highlighting the information, Ruth's cleaning it up and making it concise, and then hyperlinking to the Legislative Service Commission, the commission arm on behalf of the legislature. So it is really time and materials for us to put together. I would say where we're expending a lot of time are the House Bill 1s kind of thing, or the emerging conversation about remote learning and grade cards. And that's where we'll spend a lot of time, and rightfully so. So not a lot of time that we're creating original work for this.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, again, the great summary. I know how time consuming that can be. So that's why I was just wondering.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Special thanks to Ruth.
Thanks for that question.
Special thanks to Ruth for doing those.
Thanks, Ruth. She does everything.
Thank you, Ruth.
She can finish my sentences.
Rockstar Ruth.
She's watching YouTube, so I'm sure she appreciates that. All right. Any other thoughts about the advocacy page? I think we're all excited about that work. It's good timing with the Fair School Funding Plan and the state budget. It's very good timing. All right, on 2.02 is the Equitable School Funding article. I do want to bring that up and share my screen with you as it relates to that. It was really timely for our discussions. I like to just create this virtual folder, paper folder for you as we begin our conversations and as we move to the second half of the meeting about our strategic plan. These are really interesting conversations that are happening nationally right now as we're talking about per pupil state funding. We're talking about economically disadvantaged. We're talking about the categoricals above and beyond what a typical student needs. And it's highlighted on a page here in the middle of that article from US News. You can see the states that are spending the most on average per pupil. And these are some pretty amazing numbers. Remember our school funding formula starts at $6,020. Now, I've been doing this for almost 17 years, and I don't know the calculation of why we got to $6,020. I don't know many people that do, if any, other than it being just a residual function of the state budget. That's what the Fair School Funding Plan is all about. That's what the conversations around equity and adequacy are all about. That's the conversations about economically disadvantaged funding is all about, so that we can really define what a quality and high quality education is all about. Interesting here that some of our states are at $27,000, $24,000. Just to give you a perspective, Ohio, especially Akron, we don't get anywhere near that number unless we have a category 3 or higher special education student. So maybe something we can learn from neighboring states about in how we develop this equity dashboard and our spending per pupil. So just wanted to throw that out as a reference.
Hey, Ryan, I just had some comments on that, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Just want to confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, I'm going to switch to my phone to see if the computer's working on one sec. Might be, I hear echo. Computer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna hang the phone up. Yeah, so a couple questions. So that number that you showed, was that number just the state component of the funding, or was that inclusive of, let's say, taxes as well?
It is inclusive of property taxes and or however they fund their equation.
Okay, so that's the total number is what you're showing.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha. So that's district contribution as well as state contribution. Okay, gotcha. So a couple of those states I would expect to have higher numbers, like New York, New Jersey.
That's right.
Just because the cost of the inputs is higher. But Wyoming really surprised me, right?
Wyoming,
a place like Wyoming,
that's
it's
right.
like, okay, wait a minute. And then the other thing too is I know that some states, the way that so my other question was that do we know what? So for example, if you use New York was 24,000, do we know what portion of the 24 was state funding, and what was the sort of the district property tax contribution? And I asked that question because I know that in looking kind of nationwide, there are some states that basically limit sort of what you bring in as a total, all in, and there's a state portion, and for some states, if the state's giving you less, they allow you to raise more off of your own property taxes. Others, will cap you if your state contribution is higher. So I just was kind of curious as to, do you know? And again, I know that these are loaded questions, but just as you're kind of thinking through it, like, did the underlying article have any more intel on sort of, what percentage of that 24,000 for New York was the state portion, of what percentage was like property tax?
It doesn't get into the state local share as much, but what it does highlight is education spending as a relation to statewide spending. So their whole state pie graph and how much they spend. So you can kind of get a sense of where they prioritize things. It also talks about the differences in economically disadvantaged funding versus base funding and what that delta is all about. So the difference, I think one of the charts is the difference in per pupil funding, high versus low poverty districts. And so there are some things to glean here. It is not a comprehensive report, but I think maybe where I would go is the Wyomings of the world, because we've heard some things from them nationally, I think through NSBA, that they're emerging as a model for this conversation. So let me show you a spreadsheet that the Department of Education publishes. Used to be referred to as the Cup Report, named after Bob Cup, and it's now called the District Profile Report. It's pretty interesting. Hopefully you're seeing that now. And I highlighted the part of it that gives you a perspective here, expenditure per pupil. And you're seeing that. So it has Akron in column D, similar district average, and the statewide average. If you haven't seen the spreadsheet, and I can include this, I'll email this out to you. I'll unhide after I highlight this section. It talks about administrative expense per pupil, building operations, instructional. Those are some of the transparency spending efforts that I know we've talked about. Now, these are high-level state reported items. We're going to take it another level down, talk about level instructionary levels, special education, gifted, transportation. Like, we're going to highlight where we spend per pupil within those subcategories. But this kind of tells the story, similar district and statewide average. And just, I know you've heard it from me before. Just remember though, in Ohio, the average district, the average size district in Ohio is 2,400 kids, right? That kind of stops me to eliminate some of the column F as it relates to this comparison. Let me unhide the rest of this because I think this is a really good study. So the top of this report is demographic data. This whole section really gives you a background and perspective. Personnel data. What you can glean here is how do our average teacher salaries compare and our experience, right? And this whole section here of the experience of our teachers from 0 to 10 plus years experience. Number of administrators, average salaries, pupil teachers, ratios. And this just kind of puts you in the framework to start breaking down those indices as we've been working on them. And I thought this would be a great model to launch us off for the rest of the year. Then down at the bottom part of it, before the expenditure data, the local effort. And you see our local tax effort. And that's a ratio of a community's ability to pay compared to the taxes. So they call it the local tax effort. And you can see we have a relatively high local tax effort. And then state, local, federal revenue, and then some personnel related some pie chart related spending guidance. So think of section G in terms of where we spend our money. So we spend 52%, 20% on benefits, and then purchase service supplies. And remember, section G, if you could just picture the 5-year forecast, those spending line items in the 5-year forecast. I'll send this out to you. I think this is a great tool. Okay. All right. 3. Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I didn't know if you saw my hand raised. So if you go back to, if you can, the share, if you go back to that section.
Which section?
It's probably D, I think. Go up to D, set the D.
You see that? Okay.
Yep, that. And so you see the number 39, line item 39.
Exactly.
Says, I just wanted to bracket that conversation around, you mentioned that we have a high local tax effort. I just wanted to kind of contextualize what that might mean, especially since we're going to have a levy conversation in a minute.
That's right.
One of the studies I'm doing now is on school funding inequities, right? And one of the things that we find out when we look at districts with higher tax indexes, they actually have a lower income base that comes in. So the rate is higher, but the amount of money that come in is less. And that's why the rate is higher, because the property is valued, the valuation of a property is lower. So I just wanted to put that in context that yes, there may be a lower, tax effort index across the state, but that's because the valuation of the properties are higher. And so you get more money with a lower tax rate, higher tax rate that we have. Does that mean I probably didn't do it as good enough explanation as you would, but no, I didn't want to sit there and someone to percolate on that in a different way.
Yeah, another way, you did a perfect job in explaining that. Another way is how much a mill raises, right? So that's another way to talk about a school district's capacity and or wealth. We know that wealth definition is a little skewed in Ohio because it's just based on property, not necessarily on income. So that's another reason for the Fair School Funding Plan to right the wrongs of that equation. But no, I think you did a fantastic job explaining that. It's a complicated subject. But as you see, this is a jam-packed report summary that tells a lot.
Yeah, and then the other piece of it is, you mentioned income tax. we don't have income tax here, in Akron.
Correct.
Compare us to another district where they do have contributions from income tax, plus the valuation of property taxes. That's even more reason why our property tax valuation is higher. So just wanted to share that. I caught it slightly when you kind of glossed over it, but I because we're going to talk about levy, I thought it would be important.
No, I appreciate that. It's good to highlight it.
Hey, Ryan, just a couple of quick. So I'll save most of my questions until after I had a chance to kind of digest this a bit more. But to Dr. Akbar's point, with regard to the district income tax component of that, I don't know, and maybe this is an offline conversation, but it probably is. But just offline, can we kind of talk through sort of the history of that, sort of why there is no income tax component?
Sure.
So, and then, because again, that definitely skews that local tax effort piece. And then also as well, the other thing that jumped out when you were scrolling through this, and I'm not picking on this, but something that just jumped out, and I just want to make sure that I saw that right, is there was a line item that was looking at, was it average income per administrator?
Let's see.
And I wanted to say it was like a $20,000 difference between,
Yes, personnel data. Classroom teachers with experience, number of administrators, average administrator salary, and 20, this line item, and then pupil administrator ratio.
Yeah, so line item 20, I just want to make sure that I'm thinking about that because that's as you compare various line items in this entire spreadsheet, that's probably one of the biggest differentials in our district. So I just want to make sure that I have a handle on what we're calling a similar district. So that's basically an urban 8 district in Ohio.
No, that's a great question. As we construct this, ODE says that our quote unquote similar district, if you type in similar district in the ODE website, you'll come up with 23 like districts. In fact, let's do that right now because I do think that's important.
Yeah, because again, I don't want to misinterpret a differential because I'm not understanding kind of the foundational piece.
So hopefully you're following my button clicks here. So these are, it's actually 20 for ours. These are the similar districts. Now, across Ohio, I think, let me set the stage top down. There's 3 counties in Ohio that have the highest compensation. Whatever employee range it is, they have higher compensations. And that is the 3 largest areas in urbans. It's just the way that this works statewide. And then the next level down, I do believe that, and I can, through Forecast 5, I can show you the breakdown of these components for the Ohio 8 and probably even more appropriate, the largest 5 districts. And so you'll see here that we've got, can you see that better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So right in the middle of that spreadsheet, you see enrollment FTE. We've got districts in there that have 3,500 kids. And they could be in Stark or Allen County, counties that are not represented by our large urban centers. And that's just the fiscal makeup is when you go to the large urban centers and the more population dense. And I think there's even, what is that called? A geospatial, somebody that knows more than I do about that. ODE, I think, even has a chart, a geospatial like heat map of Ohio, where incomes and earnings are higher across Ohio, and they tend to focus in those population dense areas. So this is our similar district average. So thank you, Dr. Hall, for highlighting. So when folks are looking at this profile report, this column,
dollars is
similar district average.
Yeah, so Yeah, so it's including districts that are like 3, 4, 5,000 kids, you know, as compared to, okay, gotcha. So really if we're really looking at sort of disparity in, you know, in average administrative salary, for example, it makes more sense to look at kind of the 5 that are the most similar to us from a sort of all in, inclusive of, yeah, okay.
And much how we do with our contractual teacher negotiations and that process there, we do pull in that data, and I can share with you some of the charts that we organize around that. And so we can do that with almost all employee classifications.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I'd assumed that because of the pupil administrator ratio being so different between the 201 versus the 138. But that was instructive for you to kind of show us kind of in explicit terms. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this summary will generate a lot of conversation and thought around our information. So I'll make sure to get you a copy of that. All right. Moving on 3.01 and levy discussion. Let me open this up, and maybe this doesn't need to be a robust discussion today unless you want it to be. But on the levy discussion, what I'm constantly working on with the Assistant Treasurer, Todd Atkins, is where we are budget versus actual based on, and it's maybe budget versus actual had been the gold standard on how we report finances to the board. What did we estimate? Where's our spending throughout the year? I don't think that's the gold standard for reporting anymore. I think that the only way that we can do is pull in the last 2 years of fiscal spending and compare month over month. And as we progress through this year, as we bring students back, as you can only imagine, our normal increases for how we educate students and how many resources are wrapped around them is going to increase. It's going to cost more money. And I wish I had a delta for you today, and I'm putting on the agenda so that you continually ask me, because we need that information to start influencing levy discussions, influencing next year's budget, influencing spending priorities. So that's, you know, I just want to keep this on our radar forefront as we go through. But is there anything else about levy that you want me to add into this section, monthly reporting?
I think it will be helpful to have those dates that are required when we're doing a levy, even though it's February, if we're thinking about November possibly. I mean, it'll be here before you know it, folks.
Sure will.
It has dates in our minds of when we'd have to file the need and whatnot. I think that would be helpful.
Will do.
And when's the last time maybe we updated the finance calendar that has, you know, all of that kind of stuff on there, the 5-year forecast, and we could layer on the levy dates and all that, and so that we can always review. I think that's a good point. To Diana's point, we can review all of those kind of dates and timelines and deadlines, budget deadlines, and
good idea. Why don't we include that on every finance committee agenda? We'll just right, because it's a Google Doc, we'll hyperlink it. And so as we update it, it'll constantly be fresh. I like that idea. Let's do it. All right. Anything else before we finish the meeting on strategic planning? And it's really just goal setting and date accountability and getting your thoughts there. Anything else on levy? Okay. I do have, actually on 4.01, as it related to our community partners meetings, I did want to link the I Promise School cluster enrollment, and maybe the superintendent can walk us through what are the requirements to be included in the selection criteria. So did everybody see that linked? I'll bring that up while the superintendent is walking us through that.
Here, I'm going to pull that up as well.
Let me share my screen. Superintendent James, and then
you're just talking about the spreadsheet, right?
Just the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so it looks like these are the students
there we go.
That
can you see that?
Yes.
And it looks like those are the students who will be eligible across each of the clusters from where we'll select for the lottery for the I Promise school. This year we have to prepare for next year for 8th grade. And I know they're planning on some additional renovations at the building to make sure we can accommodate. So there are some space issues that we're studying at the building, looking at, where we're going to have those students placed. And then the bigger picture is going to be, what are we going to do at the high school level, which will be hitting us next year. I know they've been interested in looking at potentially some space, I think, on the University of Akron campus for the high school, their high school vision for that. So we'll be working with Keith Lichty on when we run the lottery. I think it'll fall similar to what we do for the STEM middle school, STEM high school, Akron Early College.
Looks like
so. This is third graders coming in.
Yeah, they'll have, they'll bring in a new class of 3rd graders, but they'll also have, a class of the, for the 3rd graders, because we're going to be moving everyone up.
And how many?
I think we have about 100 per grade level. I think there's typically 4 classrooms at each grade.
Dr. Akbar, you have your hand raised. I don't want to jump in front of you. Is that on purpose or leftover?
Yeah, that's leftover. Sorry.
Okay. Dr. James, is this still based on, originally I believe it was our most at risk, which was one of the identifiers was sort of the lowest performing 5% of our students across the district. Is this spreadsheet a representation of that?
Yeah, we're still using that criteria. And there are some assessments that we give in 1st and 2nd grade that we can look at where those kids rank on those assessments versus other kids.
Okay. And then you just kind of tell us from which cluster this spreadsheet, that's just the breakdown.
Yes,
right? Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I had a question. So, and I'm not sure if this is for Dr. James. It might be for you or for Mr. Pendleton, or maybe even for Dr. McWilliams-Woods. But so they're at conversation about sort of high school space as well, I think is what you said from a contextual standpoint.
Yes.
My question is, and I'm sure this data is out there. I would be very interested in understanding outcome differences for the students who attend I Promise versus students that are not able to get in. At each grade level. So, a 3rd grader, and again, understanding that this is a very select cohort, which is what I'm saying, a similarly situated student that could not get in, how are the I Promise kids progressing as compared to students who can't get into I Promise that were in the same category? So I would expect that the results are better. I just would love to kind of get better acquainted with what those results are.
Okay.
From a grade level by grade level, because I think part of the educational as well as business case for entertaining the high school conversation as well and again, this is just me asking this question in a reflective way, but wanting to understand, well, what kind of progress have you helped kids make in the 5 years they were with you? So if I started in 3rd grade, by the time I got to 8th grade, where am I? And so, students, their circumstances as far as home settings and things like that in that 5 year, but I would certainly hope that their academic performance, had improved to the point where they were no longer in that sort of 5%. Granted, they don't lose their spot because they've achieved out of it, but just again, wanting to understand, sort of how these, how a given cohort of students is progressing as compared to those who don't have the same resources. Does that make sense? I know I said a lot there.
No, that makes sense. And that'll be a Keith Lichty question. And I will pass that on to him because I know we do look at, of course, how those students are doing, and we can compare them to, the group that didn't get in or who aren't enrolled at iPromise.
Gotcha. Because I know that we have that call. I think the follow-up call. I think it's tomorrow.
Yes.
With Michelle Campbell, and that's one of the questions that's on my list to ask her on that call, is to ask that question. And so again, my assumption is that they're outperforming, but again, just would like to understand sort of what that delta looks like, so and then kind of thinking through, well, when you take it, so then as we talk about in finance, this equity coefficient, right, this equity factor, that may shed some light. Okay, well, we're spending, and I'm making up numbers here, we're spending $2,000 more per pupil at the iPromise school, as compared to students who are similarly situated at other schools. And this is the overall sort of testing performance as well. So now we have, a starting point for what that equity coefficient might look like, as we sort of move that conversation forward. So anyway, that's just where my head's at. And I'm just kind of being transparent with what's in my head.
Got it.
Great.
And I'm sorry, I do have another question, and it might be for tomorrow, but I guess I'm thinking about this high school space we're looking at. Is that a cost then that the district is going to assume to enable them to have to add another building to our footprint?
Right. Yeah. I don't see that when we have buildings that haven't been renovated. I'll address a little of that tomorrow. When you look at North High School, we look at the old Kenmore, we look at Miller South, we look at Reedinger, we look at Reimer and Firestone Park. So I don't see that being in a building that we would, be able to bring online for that. And I think it's still open for some discussion, and, you all have to be a big part of that on whether you believe the students who come out of the iPromise school should go into one of our college and career academies, or should they go someplace else. So I think there's a lot more conversation that has to be done.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, but also the STEM program too.
Yeah, you mean in terms of our STEM high school?
The high school and the space that we're still leasing from Akron, from the building.
Yes. So those are some of the things that, we'll have to include in that master plan for buildings that we're still operating that haven't been renovated. So we'll have some more on that.
Yeah.
Yes, and that might be the perfect segue into our strategic planning document, which I wanted to be the priority of today's meeting. And so if we don't get to all of it, I would really love your input on this document. So let's bring it up now. I know some of you have to log off, but if you could take a look at this, I really want to work on our priority list. And feel free, and this is a Google Doc, you should have editing rights. If you don't, we'll make you editors. Goals, objectives, strategies. Some of these are not strategies, they might be goals. Some of them might be goals, not objectives. So bear with me. I wanted to capture my thoughts so that, I'll come back to these areas. And I just did add this one. I do believe that probably needs to be at the top of probably all of our strategic planning. I know that the main educational strategic plan one was, but the supporting strategic plan documents, obviously, we're going to have to laser-like focus our resources to drive outcomes, especially with the learning loss that we're facing and Ohio's facing. So really what I would like your thoughts. Ruth and I can take notes here. You can type it into the progress, and then we can begin to prioritize and we can set some goals so I can focus our internal resources on meeting these days. I don't see folks with hands raised, so please just jump in.
I'm sorry, I have my hand raised. So I tried to type in here, but I think it's because I'm logged in from a personal computer, not the APS computer. But at the top where it says objectives.
Yes. Let me go there. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know how to get out. There we go. All right. Objectives.
So I think that we need to add one of the objectives at the bottom, maybe around the facilities master plan. So it's I know you wrote in the action plan at the very bottom about reviewing and engaging the community, but I think the objective is just review and report, but I think it's creating issues with facilities, and then determining the kind of a plan for it, and presenting those recommendations to the board.
I would agree 100%. I would say updating and identifying financing sources.
Yeah.
Like how are we gonna...
Yes, all of those things, and I don't have the exact words off the top of my head right now.
I'll capture the thoughts here. We can clarify it.
Yeah. Maybe, and to Patrick's point, I'm sorry, Mr. Bravo's point, there may not be, you know, this isn't a master plan where you do everything in year one. 5 to 10 year facilities master plan. By 1, 2, and 3, we have identified the funding sources for those. For years 4 through 10, in years 1 through 3, we need to find, the resources or determine the resources for those future years. So it's that whole process, and that's what I wanted to share.
That's
Whether
great.
it's electronically or physically, do we have, because it'd be good to maybe even send out the most recent version that we were working from. And to Dr. Akbar's point, that last plan, that's what it does. That breaks it up into segments, so that, to your point, we're not all doing everything in year one. They're broken into segments, and then some segments, of course, are finished, and some things got pulled from different segments and saved until the end, and we just kind of need to update it and resegment it, and then identify where we're going to pay for it, how. But I would say in that broader context, we need to see how that fits into that capital plan, the capital budget as well, for even catching up on deferred maintenance from COVID, things that we've put off, and bus replacements and everything else. I mean, how does that all fit into your broader capital budget plan? Yeah,
that's something we haven't been able to share with the board up to this point in time, but we do have a very active, I think, and a well-managed permanent improvement committee where we prioritize the maintenance spending on our buildings. That's something that we can add to a future finance committee. The master facilities plan, and again, I can't see faces here. I would always defer to Dr. James and his experience from being here from the beginning of the plan. But, you know, as we develop plans around this master facilities plans and process, I would say we do have the state's ranking system, right? And we can loosely follow the outline and how they came in with their master's facility plan, rank our remaining facilities in terms of a rubric of needs like HVAC and building envelope and windows and technology and electricity. So that might be something that we have to contract out. And let me pause there and see if Dr. James has any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, Dr. Akbar has a comment too before he has to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and this actually might be related or it may not be. With the census, you know, being completed and everything, I'm assuming that's going to mean we're going to have to review our school boundaries as well. And so, as well as thinking about the school-age children decline and whether or not that impacts any of this, that needs to kind of be a tangential conversation to overlay on top of it. In my mind, it will work. I don't want to say perfectly, but I don't see how you can have one without the other.
That's exactly how that process works. It's based on the census, which is one of the reasons why we closed so many buildings. When we first started this facility project, we were at 31,000 kids. Now we're at 21. That's a 10,000 kid loss. And so this master plan won't be done like with the Ohio Facilities Commission, because they're going to separate because we were finishing up our last building. So this will be a little different, but it'll use some of the same, you know, processes. We'll look at enrollment, where it's going. We'll have to look at the condition of buildings and then get estimates for either renovation or new build on the ones I mentioned before. And then, you know, go from there with a plan and how to parse it out, you know, in terms of segments, and then, you know, look at the cost.
And Dr. James even did us probably a little better than it was, because it was like 35,000 down to 21. It was 15%.
Oh my goodness.
It was 15% decline, and we had only shrunk our footprint about 9%. So we went a little more aggressive, I think, toward the end. But then Ryan, or Mr. Pendleton, also did a good job of putting together with Dr. James, like, okay, but we do still need some capacity for growth. We do still need some, you know, here's what our capacity should be within each building. And that was the goal that we were trying to hit. But our enrollment had shrunk 15% from the time we started the plan until about the time we made the decision on Kenmore Garfield.
To talk about timing, though, in terms of the legislation around charter school and choice options coinciding with when we passed our master facilities plan, and we've got enrollment charts back where choice option was largely just open enrollment, and we passed a bond issue prior to the global economic recession, and then like over a decade we lost those students due to choice options. It was devastating at times, very difficult. But we do to this point, and thank you to those board members who've brought this back up, we do need that master planning document. Take care, Ms. McKittrick, and I know others have to go. We do need a master planning document to keep our priorities in, by Dr. Akbar, so that as we allocate resources, we do have that focused in priority areas. So I know the superintendent will be working with us over the next few weeks, few months, about maybe a company that we'll be contracting with to start preparing that work. So that's a perfect example of the strategic planning document where I would say, right, we're not going to get that report completed in 2 weeks. It's not possible that we can get it. So we have to go through the vendor selection process, either direct because we have contracts with them currently and they know our buildings, or we have to go out to RFP, RFQ, and then that's going to take some time. We did have a report done on North some time ago, and I think that probably took a month, David.
Yeah.
It probably took about a month on one building. So this will be a little higher level. It's not going to get down into, you know, how many air handlers and those kind of things, but it will be a summary document. So those are the kind of conversations that we'd like to have on our strategic planning document to say, we would like a facilities master plan by June 30. You know, something like that, where the collective wisdom of us in the experience of the superintendent can say, yeah, that's a reasonable. And then that way, when we go to vendors, we can say, this is what we need by this date to help advise our planning, even though we'd love to have this yesterday.
Hey, Ryan, just a quick question for you. I mean, is where in all this would we be housing or having or creating a platform for a conversation around athletic facilities, as far as how those are upgraded, maintained, and added to?
Right.
You know, I know that there's, you know, I think all of us on this call are aware that there are some differences. I don't want to use the word inequities yet, because that's a conclusory word. I want to wait till we finish the research on it. But there at least appears to be an appearance that there are some sharp differentials how we fund and sort of support athletics throughout the district.
I think our intention was that this master facilities plan would be comprehensive.
Okay.
And it would include athletics. And we do have a report from the athletic committee that will be circulating here to this committee and the recommendations of that. So I just got an updated copy of that yesterday.
Okay.
And so we'll be bringing that full circle. It would be, I think it's our expectation that it is part of the report.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan.
Yes. Absolutely. So, and this is perfect. If you noticed on the strategic plan, I see a lot of you logged in there. Down at the very bottom, review master facilities plan, engage the community for input, report due. And I put June 30th. And, you know, through our conversations, I'm just putting June 30th as a realistic time frame. Lean on Dr. James, his experience with the facilities, you know, starting and finishing the master facilities plan. But if we can hit an earlier date, we will back that up. So these are the kind of things that I'd love to see on the strategic plan. I don't know if we need to go line by line here, but if I didn't capture something, please let me know. The other one here that I'm going to add is a budget document. We will get, I've been promising you and the board a budget, an outwardly facing budget document for budget season for now for a couple of years. And I will deliver a document this year. So it may follow loosely the Meritorious Budget Award, which is from the Association of School Business Officials. So I'm going to add budget planning document, and that'll be due by April. Anybody have any additions?
No, I don't have anything else, Ryan.
I don't. I think it's a great start framework for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, you know, all I really want to know is when we're going to rebuild North High School. You know, that's all I really want to know. So, just kidding.
What do you think, David?
It's probably, I know it's 36 million for the needed renovations and probably 75 million to build new.
Wow. Well, honestly, just me just conveying to my own personal feeling on it is I've always been more of a fan of renovation than rebuilding, just because a lot of those schools have a certain character to them. I'm not going to lie. I cried my eyes out when we tore down David Hill. Because that school is just so cool, the wood floors and the glass, and I'm sure others feel the same way about their own great schools throughout Akron as well. So, but I mean, totally understand why we did it. I mean, I get it, but again, I've always been a fan of renovate as opposed to rebuild.
Mm.
So Derek, I love North because North was the sister school of the old Bookdale. So when I go in North, if I go there a certain way, it's just like I'm in the old Bookdale. So
Gotcha.
I would be a fan of North, so I can pretend.
Well, under the Facilities Commission, we had little to no discretion about what buildings we got to keep.
Right.
So they said if they point rank them, right? So 0 to 100, and the higher the point, I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, it says if you're above a 75-point threshold, you have to demolish the building.
The two-thirds. It was a two-thirds rule, right?
So the plus side of that, the downside of it is now as we move forward, we won't get a state match. And that was 60 cents on the dollar. The plus side is we have complete discretion about how we do it.
Well, what's crazy is, but use that criteria, Pfeiffer was considered to be in better shape than David Hill.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, yes, although, yes.
Having been in both schools, like what?
Yeah, Patrick dropped off here. He froze out as well. On the strategic plan, I will add some dates. Please know that those are just some suggested dates, and jump in, provide feedback. And soon. Mr. Bravo is asking if we're going to adjourn soon. So let me tee it up to you all. Do you have any more items for today?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right. I'm going to text him that we're going to adjourn. And then I'll add some dates, email this out to you, the CUP report, some other materials. And then we have another meeting. When is our next meeting? We have another meeting next Wednesday.
Hey, I have a quick question off topic.
Yes.
So I know that there's a state of the schools coming up, and I know that that we got some communication about trying to limit the numbers. Is there a target number? I guess I didn't catch. Is there a target number that they're trying to get to, Dr. James?
No, at one point they talked about, probably maybe 30 or so people space in the room. And I think some people had some concerns, and I agree. I think it should be a much, smaller number. So there probably will be no more than 10 to 15 folks. And
gotcha.
It's really no big deal because it is a virtual, event.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. I know we were drawing straws to figure out who's going to get voted behind on the board side. So I was just curious. So, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Right.
All right. That concludes our meeting. Thank you so much. And
all right.
We will see you all tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good.
Right.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian. Bye-bye.